The most recent X-Men event might leave casual fans a little lost. There's some dude walking around like Jesus, but with an X tattoo, calling himself X-Man? He fought Legion and then kind of merged with him? Well, he's not new. He's actually been around for about 25 years, and he has a very strong connection to major Marvel characters like Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Cable. Here's the origin and all you need to know about this universe-hopping Omega-level mutant. Hi, I'm Dan Umpton, and this is the Doomcast. I love alternate universe stories. Crisis on Infinite Earths, House of M, Flashpoint. One of my favorites, though, is The Age of Apocalypse. In it, David Haller, the troubled son of Professor Xavier, goes back in time to before the X-Men were founded. David is known as Legion, having hundreds of split personalities with their own mutant powers. He goes to the past with the intention of fixing the future by assassinating Magneto. Instead, he kills Professor X. The result is a split timeline in which the X-Men never exist, and as a result, Apocalypse succeeds in taking over most of the Western Hemisphere and other parts of the world, creating a mutant empire that's rooted in survival of the fittest. In an unprecedented move, for 5 months, Marvel changed all of their main X-Men titles to this universe. Cable's solo book at the time was converted to his Age of Apocalypse counterpart, X-Man. X-Man shared a similar origin to Cable. While Cable was Nathan Summers, the son of Cyclops, and Madeline Pryor, who's the clone of Jean Grey, we're not going to get into it, who was sent to the future, X-Man was Nate Grey, a test tube-grown offspring that in that timeline used Cyclops and Jean Grey for his parentage. He was created by Mr. Sinister as a living weapon intended to kill Apocalypse. And yeah, there's definitely some problematic eugenic undertones there, but both of them are Omega-level mutants, meaning that they carry enough power to single-handedly destroy a planet or more. Their ability is nearly unchecked. Telepathy, telekinesis, beyond Jean Grey, Professor X, or almost anybody else. Cable's power, however, is severely hampered because he was infected with a techno-organic virus when he was a child that consumes most of his body, and in order to keep it from consuming all of him, he has to use his telepathy and telekinesis to keep it in check. Yeah, it's all very weird, but as event books tend to do, things go back to the status quo. Apocalypse is beaten, the timeline is restored, and Nate Grey, along with an evil version of that universe's beast and a thing called the Sugar Man, don't ask, end up getting sent to our timeline. As a result, he got his own book, which was lackluster, until Warren Ellis picked up the title once sales flagged, and oh boy. In the late 90s, Warren Ellis wasn't the comic-selling powerhouse that he is today. His name alone couldn't save the title, but his short run on it introduced many similar world-walking and super insane, super scientific concepts that he'd eventually revisit in things like The Authority. X-Man was reworked from an angry, ultra-powerful kid to a mutant shaman, the pinnacle of mutant evolution, who dedicated himself to stamping out metaphysical and meta-real threats from other planes of existence that only he was aware of. It was super crazy. You remember the bleed from Planetary? Well, Warren Ellis introduced a similar concept here called the Spiral. This was really the title that made me fall in love with Ellis's work to this day. I liked it so much that I made a custom t-shirt because I was a super popular teenager. But Ellis's run made a hard character to use even harder to use. Now and again, X-Man does pop up, but is conveniently shoved back into the wee hole that he was pigeonholed into because he's so insanely overpowered now, he sort of breaks writing. You can do anything with him, like Doctor Strange back in the 80s and 90s. But most recently, after returning to our timeline to determine he's dying, he set forth about with this messianic final solution. He selected 4 Horsemen of Peace, a foil to Apocalypse's Horsemen of Death, captured Apocalypse, Kitty Pryde, and an anti-mutant senator, and then set about, solving climate change, racism, inequality, poverty, greed, and bigotry. While this still makes him somewhat hard to swallow from the neoliberal X-Men, the youngest students are actually pretty revolutionary and very on board with this, until it becomes clear how great the cost of X-Man's version and vision of reshaping the future is. On the verge of defeat, X-Man pulls a Scarlet Witch, erasing apparently all of the X-Men and their extended X-Familia from existence and whisking them into what seems like a pocket dimension, similar to the Age of Apocalypse, a sort of inverse Age of Apocalypse. In Mutant Utopia, the very realization of Xavier's dream in a hyper-sanitized, kind of creepy early 50s format. Vat-grown mutant kids, kibitz farms, perfect mutant communes, at least on the surface. X-Men is going to shape the next 20 years of X-Men comics, and it's crazy to think how much, yet how little the character has changed in the context of the X-Family and comics as a whole. If you're interested in the event, it just got started, and it looks to run for the next few months across all X books. And if you enjoyed the Doomcast, please share it with your friends. Like, comment, share, and subscribe on YouTube. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.